Jasmine Carter stared in disbelief at the silver business card. Dominic Washington, CEO, Sky High Airlines. The same man she'd just ordered to move from her first-class seat now stood before her, surrounded by apologetic flight attendants. His expression remained calm, but his eyes promised consequences she couldn't imagine. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed someone get exactly what they deserved. This story about assumptions, consequences, and unexpected revelations will show you why you should never judge a book by its cover. Jasmine Carter was having a terrible morning. The 38-year-old marketing executive from Boston had barely made it to Logan International Airport in time for her flight to Los Angeles. An important client meeting awaited her, potentially the biggest account of her career, and everything that could go wrong already had. Her alarm failed to go off, her Uber driver took a congested route, and the security line stretched endlessly through the terminal. By the time she reached Gate C-17, boarding for Sky High Airlines Flight 237 was already in its final stages. The gate agent took her carry-on for gate checking, citing limited overhead space, adding another irritation to Jasmine's mounting frustration. Final boarding call for passenger Jasmine Carter, the announcement echoed as she hurried down the jet bridge, designer handbag clutched tightly, her auburn hair falling loose from its once perfect bun. When she finally stepped aboard, the lead flight attendant Keith Harrison greeted her with practiced professionalism. "Welcome to Sky High Airlines, Ms. Carter. We were waiting for you." "My apologies," Jasmine muttered, already scanning her boarding pass. 3A, first class. She made her way to the front cabin, relieved to have made the flight despite the morning's chaos. First class was nearly full, business travelers settling in with their pre-departure beverages. Jasmine approached row 3, ready to collapse into her seat and decompress before takeoff. But someone was already sitting in 3A. A well-dressed black man in a tailored navy suit sat by the window, reading through documents on a leather portfolio. He seemed completely at ease, sipping sparkling water as he reviewed what looked like quarterly reports. Jasmine checked her boarding pass again. Definitely 3A. She cleared her throat loudly. "Excuse me, you're in my seat," she announced, not bothering to check his ticket or ask politely. The man looked up, his expression neutral but attentive. "I believe I'm in the correct seat," he replied calmly, reaching for his boarding pass in his jacket pocket. "No, this is definitely my seat," Jasmine insisted, her voice rising slightly. She thrust her boarding pass toward him. "See? 3A window seat." The man examined his own ticket. "Mine also says 3A, he said, showing her his boarding pass. Jasmine's frustration boiled over. After her nightmare morning, this was the last thing she needed. Without looking closely at his ticket, she turned and signaled a flight attendant. "Excuse me. There's someone in my seat," she called out. Tara Brooks, a young flight attendant with a warm smile and professional demeanor, approached them. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes, there is," Jasmine said before the man could speak. "I'm in seat 3A, and he's sitting in it." The flight attendant addressed them both. "May I see both of your boarding passes, please?" The man handed his over without comment. Jasmine handed hers over with an exaggerated sigh. Tara examined both tickets carefully, her brow furrowing in confusion. "I see the issue. It appears we have a double booking situation. Both tickets are for seat 3A. "Well, clearly there's been a mistake," Jasmine said, glancing around the first-class cabin. "Are there any other first-class seats available?" "Let me check," Tara replied, stepping away to consult her manifest. While they waited, Jasmine turned back to the man, who remained remarkably composed despite the situation. "I've been a platinum member with this airline for years," she informed him, her tone suggesting this automatically gave her priority. "I always book window seats." The man simply nodded. "I understand. I'm sure the flight attendant will resolve this for us." Something about his calm demeanor further irritated Jasmine. "Do you fly first class often?" she asked, the question carrying an unmistakable implication. A flicker of something, perhaps recognition of her meaning, crossed his face, but his voice remained even. "Yes, quite regularly." Tara returned with the manifest. "We do have another first-class seat available, 3C, the aisle seat in this same row." Before Jasmine could respond, the man spoke up. "I'm happy to move to 3C if that would resolve the situation." Jasmine felt a surge of satisfaction but wasn't finished making her point. "No, I booked this seat specifically. I'm not sure how this mix-up happened, but I'm not going to be inconvenienced because of someone else's mistake." By now, several nearby passengers had taken notice of the exchange. A few had their phones out, angled in their direction. One woman in row 2 was unmistakably recording the interaction. "Ma'am," Tara began, "it appears to be a system error on our part. Since both of you were assigned the same seat." "Look," Jasmine interrupted, lowering her voice but not her intensity, "no offense, but I paid full price for this specific seat. I don't think it's too much to ask that I get what I paid for." She glanced at the man, adding, "I'm sure he can be comfortable in the aisle seat. He doesn't exactly look like someone who flies first class regularly anyway." A hush fell over the nearby passengers. The man's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. Tara's professional smile faltered. "Ma'am, I don't think. Is there a problem here, Tara?" Keith Harrison, the lead flight attendant, approached them. "We have a double booking for seat 3A, Tara explained quietly. Keith glanced at the man in the window seat, and a flicker of recognition crossed his face. He straightened immediately. "Mr. Washington," he said, his tone shifting from concern to deferential. "I'm so sorry for the confusion." Jasmine noticed the change immediately and interpreted it as validation of her position. "Yes, there seems to be some confusion. I've been assigned this seat, Anne." Keith turned to her. "Ma'am, I apologize for the mix-up, but there seems to be a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Jasmine insisted, "is why someone is sitting in my seat." Keith cleared his throat. "Ms. Carter, allow me to introduce Dominic Washington, CEO and majority owner of Sky High Airlines." The words hung in the air like suspended time. Jasmine felt her face flush hot, then cold, as the meaning registered. She looked from Keith to the man, Dominic Washington, who now regarded her with an unreadable expression. There must be some mistake," she stammered. "No mistake," Keith said softly. "Mr. Washington occasionally flies with us to experience the service firsthand." Dominic Washington reached into his jacket pocket and removed a silver business card holder. He extracted a card and handed it to Jasmine. "Dominic Washington, CEO, Sky High Airlines," it read in elegant embossed lettering, alongside the company logo. This was the moment from the hook, Jasmine staring in disbelief at the silver business card, surrounded by flight attendants whose apologetic expressions were directed not at her, but at the man she'd just insulted. "I believe there's been a booking error," Dominic said calmly. "It happens occasionally in our system when last-minute changes are made. I'm happy to take the aisle seat, Ms. Carter, if you prefer the window." His composure only highlighted Jasmine's flustered state. The irony wasn't lost on the passengers around them, several of whom were still recording. Jasmine could practically see the viral video taking shape, complete with hashtags and scathing commentary. That won't be necessary," she managed. "I can take the aisle." As Keith and Tara sorted out the seating arrangement, Jasmine couldn't help but reflect on how Dominic Washington had become the CEO of a major airline, a position few would have imagined for him when he was growing up in Atlanta's working-class neighborhoods. Dominic was the grandson of Harold Washington, one of the famed Tuskegee Airmen who broke barriers for black pilots during World War II. Aviation wasn't just a business for the Washington family. It was a legacy. Despite his grandfather's distinguished service, Harold returned home to face discrimination that prevented him from flying commercially. He worked as a flight instructor instead, passing his love of aviation to his son, James. James Washington became one of the first black commercial pilots for a major airline in the 1970s, facing his own battles against prejudice throughout his career. When Dominic was born, James vowed his son would have opportunities neither he nor Harold had been afforded. Dominic excelled academically, earning a scholarship to Howard University where he double-majored in aeronautical engineering and business administration. After graduation, he worked his way through various positions in the airline industry, from operations to finance, learning every aspect of the business. When a struggling regional carrier went up for sale 12 years ago, Dominic secured investors and purchased the airline, renaming it Sky High. Against all industry predictions, he transformed the small company into a major player in domestic and international travel, known for its customer service and innovative approach to airline management. Throughout his meteoric rise, Dominic maintained a practice his father had taught him: experience your product as your customers do. Every month, he would book a flight under his own name, never using a pseudonym, as he believed in accountability, and travel as a regular passenger. Sometimes in economy, sometimes in business or first class, he observed operations, took notes, and implemented improvements based on his experiences. That's exactly what he'd been doing today, a routine quality control flight, when Jasmine Carter confronted him. Back in the present moment, Jasmine settled into seat 3C, acutely aware of the whispers around her. A woman across the aisle caught her eye and quickly looked away, unable to hide her smirk. A businessman 2 rows ahead was typing furiously on his phone, no doubt sharing the encounter on social media. "Can I get you anything before takeoff, Mr. Washington?" Tara asked, her professional demeanor now warmed with genuine respect. "Just water is fine, thank you, Tara," he replied, knowing her name without checking her badge, another detail that wasn't lost on Jasmine or the observing passengers. "And for you, Miss Carter?" Tara's tone remained professional but noticeably cooler. "Water as well, please," Jasmine said quietly. As Tara moved away, Dominic returned to reviewing his documents, seemingly unaffected by the entire encounter. Jasmine sat rigidly beside him, unable to focus on the magazine she'd pulled from her bag, the words blurring before her eyes. She wanted to apologize, to explain that she wasn't normally like this, that she'd had a terrible morning and the stress had gotten to her. But the words stuck in her throat. What could she possibly say to undo what had just happened? "First time flying to Los Angeles?" Dominic asked suddenly, not looking up from his papers. The simple question, devoid of sarcasm or accusation, somehow made Jasmine feel worse. "No," she answered. "Business trip." He nodded. "Sky High flies this route 6 times daily. It's one of our most profitable corridors." The conversation died as quickly as it had begun. Jasmine stared straight ahead as the safety demonstration started, wondering how badly the video of her behavior would damage her reputation, and whether her career could survive what was coming. As Flight 237 reached cruising altitude, Jasmine Carter sat stiffly in seat 3C, pretending to read a marketing journal while replaying the humiliating encounter in her mind. Each mental replay made her cringe deeper, revealing new layers of her inappropriate behavior. Had she really implied that Dominic Washington didn't look like he belonged in first class? The memory made her stomach clench. What had she meant by that, exactly? The question burrowed into her consciousness, demanding examination. It wasn't the first time Jasmine had made assumptions about people based on appearance. There was the time at her gym when she'd asked a black woman where the towels were, assuming she was staff rather than a fellow member. Or when she'd complimented her colleague Thomas on speaking so well during a presentation, not understanding why he'd seemed offended afterward. Each memory surfaced with new clarity, stripped of the justifications she'd wrapped them in at the time. She'd always considered herself progressive, even enlightened. She voted for Obama, for heaven's sake, and had black friends. Well, work acquaintances. Like Layla from the creative department, whom she occasionally had lunch with. But sitting beside the man she'd just insulted, the CEO whose airline she'd flown dozens of times, forced a perspective she couldn't escape. Meanwhile, across the aisle, Dominic Washington was on his tablet, composing an email to Maya Williams, Sky High's PR director. "Maya," he wrote, "we may have a situation developing. An incident occurred during boarding on my LAX flight involving another passenger who didn't believe I belonged in first class. Several passengers recorded it. Be prepared for possible social media activity. I noticed the hashtag Black CEO being typed on at least one phone. I'm fine, and I've resolved the immediate situation, but wanted you to be aware in case this gains traction. We'll discuss further when I land. DW." He sent the email, then returned to reviewing quarterly projections. Unlike Jasmine, whose thoughts remained fixated on the encounter, Dominic compartmentalized the incident. It wasn't the first time he'd faced assumptions about his place in the world, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Back at Sky High headquarters in Atlanta, Maya Williams received Dominic's email and immediately began monitoring social media platforms. She'd handled similar situations before. Dominic's monthly, undercover boss, flights occasionally resulted in interactions worthy of PR attention, though usually positive ones. "Jose," she called to her assistant, "let's set up the social listening tools for hashtags #Black CEO, #SkyHigh, and maybe #FirstClass while black." Dominic just flagged a potential situation. 30 minutes into the flight, Jasmine finally gathered enough courage to attempt an apology. She turned slightly toward Dominic, who was now reviewing passenger satisfaction reports. "Mr. Washington," she began hesitantly. "Yes, Ms. Carter," he replied, his tone neutral as he looked up from his tablet. The words dissolved on her tongue. What could she possibly say? "Sorry, I didn't think you belonged in first class because you're black." The raw truth was too revealing, too damning to articulate. Never mind," she said instead, turning away. Dominic observed her briefly, then returned to his work. Years of navigating corporate America as a black executive had taught him to read people quickly, their comfort levels, their biases, their capacities for growth. In Jasmine, he saw genuine discomfort, perhaps the first stirrings of self-examination. That was something, at least. 2 hours into the flight, Jasmine checked her phone in airplane mode, relieved to find no new notifications. Perhaps the incident hadn't made it online after all. Maybe those passengers had only been texting friends, not posting to social media. She allowed herself a small measure of hope. That hope shattered when the businessman from row 1 walked past on his way to the lavatory and muttered, "Going viral, Karen," just loud enough for her to hear. Panic rising, Jasmine opened her email app and began drafting a message to Sky High customer service. Regarding an incident on Flight 237, she typed, then deleted it. "I would like to apologize for my behavior," she tried again, but deleted that too. Each attempt felt inadequate, performative rather than genuine. She looked over at Dominic, who was now speaking quietly with Keith about operational details. Despite everything, he'd maintained absolute professionalism. He hadn't called security, hadn't demanded she be removed from the flight, hadn't leveraged his considerable power to punish her behavior. The contrast between his conduct and hers was stark and damning. As the flight attendants prepared the cabin for the final approach to LAX, Jasmine heard snippets of conversation from the rows behind her. "Can't believe she said that to his face. Probably thinks she can get away with it because she's white. Already at 200,000 views on TikTok." Jasmine's heart sank. 200,000 views. In just a few hours. She glanced at her watch, they still had 30 minutes before landing. 30 minutes before she'd have to face whatever awaited her in Los Angeles, and whatever digital firestorm was brewing online. When the captain announced their final descent, Dominic closed his portfolio and turned to Jasmine. "First time experiencing turbulence can be uncomfortable," he said, referring to the slight bumpiness they'd encountered earlier. But they both knew he wasn't really talking about the flight. Jasmine nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "Yes," she said quietly. "It certainly is." As the plane touched down at LAX, Jasmine braced herself for what would come next. Not just the immediate aftermath of deplaning beside the CEO she'd insulted, but the longer-term consequences of having her worst moment captured and shared with the world. What she didn't yet understand was that this turbulence was just beginning. The real storm awaited her online, where judgment travels at the speed of light and redemption moves at a glacial pace. By the time Jasmine Carter checked into the Beverly Wilshire Hotel the following afternoon, her phone had become a portal to her own public shaming. The notifications were relentless: email alerts, text messages, social media tags, voicemails, and news alerts, all centering on what was now being called #BlackCOGate. The video had indeed gone viral, with multiple angles captured by different passengers. The most damaging version, shot from the row behind her, clearly captured her dismissive tone and the implication that Dominic Washington didn't look like he belonged in first class. It had amassed over 3 million views in less than 24 hours. The hashtags #BlackCEO, #KarenOnAirplane, and #SkyHighJustice were trending nationally. Memes featuring screenshots of her incredulous expression when learning Dominic's identity were everywhere, captioned with variations of "the moment she knew." Jasmine collapsed onto the hotel bed, scrolling through the carnage. News outlets had picked up the story, framing it as yet another example of everyday racism faced by successful Black Americans. One business publication had already run a profile on Dominic Washington titled, "The CEO Who Couldn't Sit in His Own Seat," detailing his remarkable journey from Atlanta to aviation industry leadership. Her phone rang, the client she'd flown to Los Angeles to meet. "Jasmine," said Harrison Blackwell, his voice tight with discomfort. "We've decided to postpone tomorrow's meeting." "Harrison, please," she began. "I can explain. Our company has a strong commitment to diversity and inclusion," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "In light of the situation, we feel it's best to take some time to reevaluate our marketing needs. Translation: you've become toxic, and we don't want to be associated with you." "I understand," she said quietly, though she didn't, not fully, not yet. As she ended the call, an email notification appeared from her own company's CEO. "Jasmine, please call me immediately regarding the viral video situation. We need to discuss your position with the firm and next steps. Warren." Her career was imploding in real time, all because of a 3-minute interaction that revealed biases she hadn't even realized she harbored. Meanwhile, Sky High Airlines had released an official statement. Sky High Airlines is committed to creating an inclusive environment where all passengers are treated with dignity and respect, regardless of race, gender, religion, or background. We acknowledge that an unfortunate incident occurred on one of our flights that does not reflect our company values. We are using this as an opportunity to reinforce our commitment to diversity and inclusion throughout our organization. We appreciate the dialogue this has created and remain dedicated to ensuring all passengers have a positive experience when choosing Sky High. The statement was diplomatic, avoiding direct mention of Jasmine while clearly addressing the situation. It was followed by an interview Dominic Washington gave to CNN from his Los Angeles office. "What happened on that flight happens to Black professionals every day across America," he said calmly. "The assumption that we don't belong in certain spaces is pervasive and damaging. However, I don't believe public shaming is productive. I would rather this incident spark meaningful conversations about unconscious bias and how we can all do better." His grace under pressure only amplified Jasmine's shame. While she hid in her hotel room, he was turning the incident into a teaching moment, emerging as both victim and leader. Jasmine's company executives weren't nearly as understanding. The conference call with Warren Peters, CEO of Boston Strategic Marketing, and Diane Cohen, head of human resources, was brief and devastating. "The optics are terrible, Jasmine," Warren said. "We've already lost 2 clients who cited concerns about our company culture after seeing the video. We're placing you on administrative leave pending a full review," Diane added. And we recommend you issue a public apology as soon as possible. After the call, Jasmine ventured down to the hotel restaurant, desperate for a glass of wine and something to eat. She was recognized immediately. A server approached her table, then retreated to whisper with colleagues. Nearby diners stared and took surreptitious photos. She heard whispers, "That's the woman from the plane," and fled back to her room, ordering room service instead. As she picked at her Caesar salad, Jasmine scrolled through her contacts and stopped at Layla Jackson's name. Layla was the closest thing she had to a black friend, a talented creative director at her company with whom she occasionally had lunch. They weren't close, but Jasmine desperately needed perspective from someone who might understand the cultural dynamics she'd stumbled into. "Layla?" "It's Jasmine," she said when her colleague answered. I need some advice." After a long pause, Layla responded, "I saw the video, Jasmine. Everyone at the office has." "I know it looked bad," Jasmine began. "It didn't just look bad," Layla interrupted. "It was bad. But I'm guessing you didn't call to hear that." "I don't know what to do," Jasmine admitted. "Everything's falling apart." Layla sighed. "You want the truth? This isn't an isolated incident, Jasmine. I've noticed how you interact with people of color at work. The way you spoke to the maintenance staff last month. The surprise in your voice when you complimented my presentation to the Harrington client." "What? I never," Jasmine started to protest, then stopped. Had she? The memories began to surface, moments she'd dismissed or forgotten that might have told a different story than the one she told herself about who she was. "I'm not saying you're a terrible person," Layla continued. "But you have blind spots. Big ones. And now they're on display for the world to see." After the call ended, Jasmine stared at her reflection in the hotel mirror. Who was this woman whose career was in free fall, whose name was becoming synonymous with privilege and prejudice? Was this really who she was? Have you ever had a moment that forced you to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself? Comment number 1 if you believe Jasmine deserves this public shaming, or number 2 if you think the internet outrage has gone too far. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed someone make assumptions based on race, and subscribe to hear what happened when Dominic Washington decided to respond to the controversy in an unexpected way. How would you handle being in Jasmine's position right now? Let me know in the comments below as we continue this incredible story. The corner office on the 32nd floor of Sky High Tower offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles, but Dominic Washington's attention was fixed on his computer screen. The incident video had accumulated over 5 million views across platforms, spawning countless reaction videos, commentary threads, and news segments. "Your coffee, sir," said his assistant, Michael Chen, placing a steaming mug on the desk. "And Maya is here for your 9 o'clock. "Thank you, Michael. Send her in." Maya Williams entered with the confident stride that had helped her rise to become Sky High's Director of Public Relations. At 36, she had already navigated several corporate crises with the precision of a seasoned diplomat. "The board members are nervous," she said without preamble, taking a seat across from Dominic. "Harrison called this morning. They're concerned about brand impact." Dominic nodded, unsurprised. "What are the numbers telling us?" "Mixed bag. Mentions up 400%, sentiment split. Half the commenters are calling for the woman's head on a plate. The other half are praising your response as dignified. Bookings haven't been affected, but it's early." "And the woman? Ms. Carter?" Maya consulted her tablet. "Jasmine Carter, 38, marketing executive at Boston Strategic Marketing. They've placed her on administrative leave. She's being crucified online. Several campaigns to get her fired, doxing attempts, the usual internet lynch mob tactics." Dominic frowned. "That's not what I want. With respect, sir, this isn't about what you want anymore. The story has taken on a life of its own." Rising from his desk, Dominic moved to the window. Los Angeles sprawled before him, a city where he'd once been told he'd never secure investors for his airline. The memory of that particular banker, who'd suggested Dominic might be more comfortable in transportation or food service, surfaced briefly before he pushed it aside. "Have you ever heard of my grandfather, Maya?" he asked. "Harold Washington? The Tuskegee Airman. You've mentioned him before." Dominic nodded. Grandpa Harold flew 93 combat missions over Nazi Germany. Shot down 2 enemy aircraft. Came home to a country that wouldn't let him fly commercial planes because of his skin color. He turned from the window. He never broke, never lost his dignity. Not once. "He sounds remarkable," Maya said quietly. "He taught me something important about handling racism." He said, "Dominic, anger burns the hand that holds it. Strategic responses change systems." Dominic returned to his desk and pulled up the video again. "Look at this woman's face when she realizes who I am," he said, pausing on Jasmine's expression of shock and embarrassment. "That's not a moment of growth. It's a moment of fear. She's not sorry she did it, she's sorry she did it to me." "So what's your strategic response here?" Maya asked. "Education over punishment," Dominic replied. "I don't want her cancelled. I want something more meaningful." Their conversation was interrupted by Dominic's private line. He checked the caller ID. "It's Aisha," he said, referring to his younger sister. "I should take this." Maya nodded and stepped out as Dominic answered. "Hey, sis. Mom's furious," Aisha Washington said without greeting. "She's threatening to fly to LA and give that woman a piece of her mind." Dominic laughed despite himself. Gloria Washington, at 72, remained a force of nature. "Tell Mom I'm handling it." "Are you?" "Because that video." Aisha's voice trailed off. "It reminded me of when we were kids. Remember that field trip to the Aviation Museum? When the guide asked if you were separated from your class?" "I remember," Dominic said quietly. He'd been 9 years old, the only black child in a group of gifted students touring the Museum of Flight in Seattle. The guide had assumed he was with another school group, one from a less affluent district visiting that same day. "It never stops, does it?" Aisha asked. "No matter how high you climb. It gets better," Dominic insisted. "Different, but better." After ending the call, Dominic summoned his executive team for an impromptu meeting. 8 division heads gathered in the conference room overlooking the runways of LAX, where sky-high planes took off and landed in a carefully orchestrated ballet of arrivals and departures. "I want to use this incident," he announced, "to launch a company-wide inclusivity initiative. Not just diversity training, everyone does that. Something substantive." Jeffrey Palmer, the veteran CFO who'd been with Dominic since Sky High's early days, looked skeptical. "What exactly did you have in mind?" "A comprehensive program. Unconscious bias training for all staff. Revised hiring practices. Partnerships with HBCUs for our internship program. And a media campaign featuring real stories from our employees and passengers about inclusion and belonging." "That's a significant investment," Jeffrey noted. "So is losing customers because they don't feel respected," countered Amara Okafor, the Nigerian-born VP of Customer Experience. "I'm with Amara," said Brandon Fitzgerald, VP of Operations. "This isn't just about PR. It's about who we are as a company." Dominic nodded appreciatively. This was why he built this particular team, diverse not just in background but in perspective. "Maya," he said, turning to his PR director, "I want this initiative to be authentic, not performative. No rainbow washing or shallow gestures. Real change." "Understood," Maya replied. "But there's still the immediate situation. The woman from the plane, Jasmine Carter. The internet isn't going to forget about her anytime soon." "Leave Ms. Carter to me," Dominic said. I have something specific in mind. Later that afternoon, as Dominic reviewed the proposed initiative framework, his thoughts returned to Jasmine Carter. He wondered what she was experiencing now, as the subject of intense public scrutiny and shame. He'd been in similar situations, different contexts, but the same sense of being reduced to a viral moment, a hashtag, a cautionary tale. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Carter has posted a public apology on her social channels. Seems genuine, not PR crafted. Worth a look. Dominic found the post easily. It had already been shared thousands of times, with reactions ranging from supportive to skeptical to openly hostile. I want to address my behavior on Sky High Airlines Flight 237, Jasmine had written. My actions toward Mr. Washington were inexcusable. They reflected assumptions and biases I didn't even realize I held. I am deeply sorry for the hurt and disrespect I caused. While this was a humbling moment for me personally, it reflects a much larger problem that Black professionals face daily. I have no excuse, only a commitment to do better, to learn, and to change. To Mr. Washington, your grace in that moment spoke volumes about your character. Mine spoke volumes about what I need to work on. It wasn't perfect, but it felt sincere, a starting point, at least. Dominic considered his options. He could ignore her, which was certainly his right. He could publicly accept her apology and move on. Or he could try something different, something that might transform this viral moment into meaningful change. He called Maya back. I've made a decision about Ms. Carter. I want to reach out to her directly. Are you sure that's wise? Maya asked. Sometimes distance is the best approach. I'm not interested in the best approach, Dominic replied. I'm interested in the right one. After they hung up, Dominic drafted an email to Sky High's legal department, outlining his plan and requesting their input. It was unconventional, certainly. Possibly risky. But as his grandfather had taught him, strategic responses change systems. Anger only burns the hand that holds it. The curtains in Jasmine's hotel room remained drawn as she entered day 3 of what she'd begun to think of as her self-imposed exile. Outside, Los Angeles continued its relentless sunshine and activity. Inside, Jasmine navigated the darkest moment of her professional life. Her client had officially canceled their meeting, citing scheduling conflicts that fooled no one. Her company's HR department had extended her administrative leave indefinitely, pending a thorough review of the situation. Her social media mentions had become so toxic that she deleted the apps from her phone. Even her parents had called from their retirement community in Florida, her father's disappointment evident even through the phone. We raised you better than this, Jasmine, he'd said quietly, which somehow hurt worse than if he'd yelled. The room service attendant who delivered her breakfast barely made eye contact, suggesting her notoriety had spread even to the hotel staff. Jasmine left the Eggs Benedict untouched, her appetite diminished by anxiety and shame. Her apology post had done little to stem the tide of public outrage. While some commenters acknowledged her accountability, far more dismissed it as damage control or performative remorse. The internet, it seemed, was not in a forgiving mood. Staring at the ceiling, Jasmine confronted the painful truth: she had become the villain in someone else's story, worse, in her own story. The realization was both devastating and oddly clarifying. With nothing but time and regret on her hands, she began researching. First, she looked up Dominic Washington's biography, reading about his remarkable journey from Atlanta to aviation industry leadership. She watched documentaries about unconscious bias and read articles about microaggressions in professional settings. She found interviews with Black executives discussing the subtle and not-so-subtle barriers they'd faced. Each new piece of information illuminated another dimension of her behavior on the plane. It wasn't just what she'd said to Dominic, it was the ease with which she'd said it, the unexamined assumptions that had guided her actions, the privilege that had allowed her to move through the world without considering these dynamics. By afternoon, Jasmine had filled a hotel notepad with reflections and realizations. It wasn't enough to simply say sorry and move on. She needed to do better, to be better. But how to begin when the world had already decided who she was? Taking a deep breath, she opened her laptop and navigated to the Sky High Airlines website. Finding the Contact Us page, she clicked on Customer Relations and began typing. To whom it may concern, I am writing regarding an incident on Flight 237 from Boston to Los Angeles involving myself and CEO Dominic Washington. She paused, realizing this generic approach would likely never reach him. Her message would be filtered through layers of customer service representatives, probably flagged as potential litigation, and sanitized before anyone of significance saw it. Instead, she tried a different tack, searching LinkedIn for Sky High executives. She found Maya Williams, Director of Public Relations, and sent a connection request with a brief note explaining who she was and requesting a channel to communicate directly with Mr. Washington. To her surprise, Maya accepted the connection within hours but replied with a polite but firm message. MS. Carter, while I appreciate your outreach, I'm sure you understand that Mr. Washington receives numerous communication requests daily. I would be happy to pass along any message you might have for him. Best regards, Maya Williams. It was a professional brush-off, designed to protect the CEO from potentially problematic communications. Jasmine understood the response. She would have done the same in Maya's position, but it didn't help her situation. That evening, after ordering a glass of wine from room service, delivered by yet another staff member who avoided eye contact, Jasmine made a decision. If traditional channels wouldn't work, she would have to try something more direct. She spent the next 4 hours crafting a comprehensive letter to Dominic Washington. Not an email, not a social media post, but an actual letter, thoughtful, detailed, and deeply personal. Dear Mr. Washington, she began. This is not an attempt to excuse my inexcusable behavior, but rather to offer you the complete and unvarnished truth about the person who disrespected you on Flight 237. She wrote about her background, her unexamined privileges, the gradual recognition of her own biases. She acknowledged the specific harm of her actions and the broader pattern they represented. She detailed what she'd learned in the days since, the resources she'd consulted, the painful self-examination she'd undertaken. I understand completely if you never wish to interact with me again, she concluded. You owe me nothing, certainly not forgiveness or absolution. But I wanted you to know that this experience has fundamentally changed how I see myself and the world. Whatever consequences come my way professionally or personally, I accept them. More importantly, I commit to ensuring that this moment becomes a turning point, not just a temporary embarrassment that fades without creating real change in my life and actions. The next morning, Jasmine printed the letter at the hotel business center, ignoring the side eyes from other guests, and sent it via courier to Sky High's Los Angeles offices, marked Personal and Confidential, for Dominic Washington. Then she waited, with no expectation of a response, simply hoping he would read it. 3 days later, as Jasmine was preparing to check out of the hotel and return to Boston to face whatever remained of her career, her phone chimed with an email notification from an unfamiliar address. Subject: Your letter. From d.washington@skyhigh.com. Ms. Carter. I received and read your letter. It was thoughtful and appeared sincere. While written apologies are meaningful, real change happens through actions, not words. I would like to meet with you to discuss both the incident and potential next steps. If you're amenable, please come to Sky High's Los Angeles offices tomorrow at 2 p.m. Ask for Maya Williams at reception. Regards. Dominic Washington, Chief Executive Officer, Sky High Airlines. Jasmine read the email 3 times, certain she'd misunderstood. He wanted to meet with her. The man she'd insulted and humiliated, whose company and reputation she'd potentially damaged. The logical part of her brain screamed, legal trap. He was probably setting up a face-to-face meeting to facilitate a lawsuit or some other official action against her. But something about the tone of the email, its directness and lack of either hostility or false warmth, suggested otherwise. This was a man who didn't need to resort to deception. He had all the power in this situation already. With trembling fingers, Jasmine replied. Mr. Washington. I'm deeply grateful for your willingness to meet. I'll be there tomorrow at 2 p.m. Sincerely. Jasmine Carter. After sending the response, she called the airline to change her return flight to Boston, pushing it back by 1 day. Whatever awaited her at Sky High headquarters, condemnation, litigation, or something else entirely, Jasmine felt she had no choice but to face it directly. For the first time since the incident, she opened the curtains in her hotel room, allowing the Los Angeles sunshine to fill the space. The light was almost painfully bright after days of self-imposed darkness, but it felt like a necessary discomfort, the first step toward whatever came next. The Sky High Airlines headquarters in downtown Los Angeles stood 40 stories tall, its glass exterior reflecting the clear blue California sky. The company logo, a stylized silver wing, adorned the top of the building, visible from blocks away. Jasmine approached the imposing structure with a mixture of dread and determination, dressed in a conservative navy suit she hoped conveyed both professionalism and contrition. Inside the soaring lobby, water features and living walls created an atmosphere of tranquility at odds with Jasmine's churning stomach. She approached the security desk, aware of sidelong glances from employees crossing the atrium. Had they recognized her from the video, or was her anxiety making her paranoid? I have a 2 o'clock appointment with Maya Williams, she told the security officer, struggling to keep her voice steady. My name is Jasmine Carter. The officer's expression remained neutral as he checked his computer, but Jasmine thought she detected a flicker of recognition at her name. Ms. Williams has been notified of your arrival, he said, printing a visitor badge. Please take the executive elevator to the 32nd floor. Someone will meet you there. The ride up felt interminable. Jasmine used the reflective elevator doors to check her appearance one last time, hair neatly styled, makeup subtle, expression appropriately serious. What did one wear to meet the CEO one had racially insulted? The absurdity of the situation almost made her laugh, but the sound that escaped was closer to a sob. When the doors opened on the 32nd floor, Maya Williams was waiting. In person, the PR director was even more impressive than her LinkedIn photo suggested, tall and poised in a red sheath dress, her braided hair styled in an elegant updo. Ms. Carter, she said, extending her hand. I'm Maya Williams. Jasmine shook her hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. Thank you for arranging this meeting, she said. Mr. Washington is expecting you, Maya replied, her tone professional but cool. This way, please. As they walked through the executive suite, Jasmine felt the stares of staff members. Some were openly curious, others deliberately looked away. Word of her visit had clearly spread throughout the office. Maya paused at a mahogany door at the end of the corridor. A word of advice, she said quietly. Mr. Washington values authenticity above all else. Whatever you do, don't try to manage his perception of you. Before Jasmine could respond, Maya knocked and opened the door. Ms. Carter is here, she announced. Dominic Washington rose from behind a large desk position before floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles. The office was impressive without being ostentatious. Aviation memorabilia shared space with family photos and academic achievements. A vintage propeller hung on one wall, while a series of framed black and white photographs of men in military flight suits lined another. Thank you, Maya, Dominic said. Please hold my calls for the next hour. As Maya exited, closing the door behind her, Jasmine stood awkwardly, unsure of the protocol for this unprecedented situation. Please, sit down, Dominic said, gesturing to a seating area with 2 leather armchairs positioned near the windows. The initial interaction was strained. Jasmine perched on the edge of one chair while Dominic took the other, the air between them heavy with unspoken tension. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me, Jasmine began, the carefully rehearsed opening to her prepared apology. Before we get to that, Dominic interrupted gently, I'd like to show you something. He rose and walked to the wall of photographs, indicating she should join him. Jasmine complied, standing a respectful distance away as he pointed to the centermost image, an elderly black man standing proudly beside a P-51 Mustang fighter plane. "My grandfather, Harold Washington," Dominic explained. "One of the original Tuskegee Airmen. He flew 93 combat missions over Nazi Germany during World War II. Shot down 2 enemy aircraft. He looks very distinguished," Jasmine said, unsure where this was going. "When he came home from the war," Dominic continued, "he applied to every major airline. Despite his combat experience and exemplary record, not one would hire him as a pilot." He moved to the next photograph. "This is my father, James. He became one of the first black commercial airline pilots in the 1970s, but only after years of fighting discrimination." He turned to face Jasmine directly. "Do you know why I'm telling you this?" She shook her head. "Because I want you to understand that what happened on that plane wasn't just about you and me. It was about a history that continues to shape present realities." Jasmine nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "I understand." "I don't think you do," Dominic said, not unkindly. "Not fully. Not yet." He returned to his seat, indicating she should do the same. "But your letter suggested you want to." Back in the seating area, Dominic continued. "Ms. Carter, I've experienced variations of our encounter throughout my entire career. The surprise when I introduced myself as the CEO. The assumptions about how I got my position. The subtle and not so subtle ways people communicate that I don't belong in certain spaces. I'm truly sorry," Jasmine said, meaning it more deeply than she ever had before. "I believe you are," Dominic acknowledged. "What's more interesting to me is why you're sorry, and what you plan to do about it." The question hung in the air between them. Was she sorry because she'd been caught and exposed? Sorry because her career was in jeopardy? Or sorry because she genuinely recognized the harm caused by her actions and attitudes? "I'm sorry because I was wrong," Jasmine said finally. "Not just about who you were, but about who I thought I was. I've always considered myself a good person, fair-minded, not racist." The word was difficult to say aloud. But good intentions aren't enough if they coexist with unexamined biases that hurt other people. Dominic studied her for a long moment. "That's a start," he said. "A good one, actually." He leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Carter, I could have handled our situation in various ways. I could have had you removed from the flight. I could have issued a statement condemning your behavior. I could have remained silent and let the internet exact its particular brand of justice. Why didn't you?" Jasmine asked, genuinely curious. "Because none of those options create meaningful change," Dominic replied. "They might satisfy a desire for punishment or vindication, but they don't address the underlying issues that led to the incident in the first place." He rose and walked to his desk, returning with a tablet. "I have a proposition for you," he said, handing it to her. On the screen was a presentation titled, "Sky High Inclusivity Initiative." As Jasmine scrolled through the slides, she saw plans for a comprehensive program addressing unconscious bias, inclusive customer service, and diverse hiring practices. "We're launching this company-wide initiative next month," Dominic explained. "Part of it includes a media campaign featuring real conversations about inclusion and belonging." He paused, allowing the implication to sink in. "You want me to participate?" Jasmine asked incredulously. "After what I did?" "Precisely because of what you did," Dominic corrected. "And because of what you're doing now. Acknowledging it, learning from it, committing to change." Jasmine shook her head in disbelief. "Most people would want me as far away from their company as possible." "I'm not most people," Dominic said simply. "And I believe your experience, both the mistake and the aftermath, could be valuable to others. The question is whether you're willing to be vulnerable enough to share it." Jasmine considered the proposition. Participating would mean continuing to face public scrutiny, to acknowledge her mistake repeatedly, to make herself vulnerable in ways that were deeply uncomfortable. It would be easier to return to Boston, weather the professional storm, and eventually move on when the internet found its next target. But easier didn't mean better. I would be honored to participate, she said finally. Though I'm not sure how much credibility I'll bring to an inclusivity campaign. Sometimes the most powerful advocates are those who've had to confront their own biases, Dominic replied. Maya will be in touch about the details if you're serious. I am, Jasmine affirmed. But I have to ask, why take this risk on me? You don't know me. I haven't earned this chance. Dominic's expression softened slightly. Ms. Carter, my grandfather used to say that true change happens when we choose growth over grievance. I believe you're genuinely committed to growth. The question is whether you're willing to do the work it requires. As their meeting concluded, Dominic walked Jasmine to the door. Maya will see you out and provide more information about the initiative. Jasmine paused at the threshold. Mr. Washington, thank you for seeing potential where others, including myself, might have seen only failure. Dominic nodded. We'll be in touch, Ms. Carter. As Maya escorted her back to the elevator, Jasmine felt a curious mixture of emotions. Humility, gratitude, and the faintest glimmer of hope that something meaningful might emerge from her worst public moment. He's taking a risk on you, Maya said as they waited for the elevator. Don't make him regret it. I won't, Jasmine promised, stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught a final glimpse of the sky-high executive suite, a space she'd entered in disgrace but somehow left with the beginning of a path forward. 2 months after her meeting with Dominic Washington, Jasmine Carter sat in a conference room at Sky High's Atlanta headquarters, reviewing marketing materials for the company's inclusivity initiative. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman who had become infamous for her biased behavior was now helping shape a campaign to combat that very problem. I think we need to be more direct here, she said, pointing to a passage in the employee training manual. Softer language might be more comfortable, but it can obscure the message. Maya Williams nodded thoughtfully. You may be right. Draft an alternative and send it to me. Their working relationship had evolved over the past weeks, from Maya's initial skepticism to a cautious professional respect. The PR director remained protective of both Dominic and the company's reputation, but she'd come to value Jasmine's marketing expertise and, more importantly, her willingness to speak uncomfortable truths. Will do, Jasmine replied, making a note on her tablet. Also, I've been thinking about the video testimonials. If we're really committed to authenticity, we should include perspectives from people who've made mistakes, not just those who've experienced bias. You mean like yours? Maya asked directly. Jasmine nodded. Mine, yes, but others too. Create a space where people can talk about growth without fear of permanent condemnation. I'll bring it up with Dominic, Maya said, gathering her materials as their meeting concluded. By the way, he wants to see you before you head back to Boston. He's in his office until 6. As Jasmine packed up her work, she reflected on the extraordinary path that had brought her here. After their initial meeting in Los Angeles, Dominic had connected her with Sky High's diversity consultants, who helped design a personalized education program addressing unconscious bias and racial equity. While participating in that program, Jasmine had continued correspondence with Dominic about the company's inclusivity initiative, offering marketing insights that eventually led to a formal consulting arrangement. Her professional life in Boston had taken a different turn. Boston Strategic Marketing had ultimately offered her position back, but with conditions that made clear her standing had diminished permanently. After careful consideration, Jasmine had declined, choosing instead to resign and focus on her work with Sky High while exploring new career directions. The personal transformation had been even more significant than the professional one. Difficult conversations with family and friends had revealed how deeply her worldview had been shaped by privilege and unexamined assumptions. Some relationships strengthened through honesty, others couldn't withstand the discomfort of accountability. Her friendship with Layla Jackson had deepened considerably. Layla had initially been skeptical of Jasmine's conversion, as she called it, but over time came to appreciate her former colleague's genuine commitment to change. Their weekly video calls became a space for Jasmine to ask questions, receive honest feedback, and understand perspectives she'd previously overlooked. "You're not the same person you were on that plane," Layla had told her recently. "And I don't just mean you're more careful about what you say. You actually see things differently now." It was true. Jasmine noticed dynamics she'd been blind to before, in media, in public spaces, in everyday interactions. She caught herself making assumptions and corrected her thinking. She spoke up when others displayed the same biases she'd once harbored. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was necessary. Arriving at Dominic's Atlanta office, similar to his Los Angeles space but with different aviation memorabilia, Jasmine found him reviewing the final presentation for the inclusivity campaign launch. "Come in," he said, gesturing to a chair beside his desk rather than the more formal seating area. "I want your thoughts on this before we finalize it." They spent the next hour discussing the presentation, with Jasmine offering suggestions to strengthen key points and Dominic occasionally challenging her perspective. Their working relationship had evolved into something neither could have predicted, a collaboration based on mutual respect and shared goals, despite their inauspicious beginning. "I think we're ready," Dominic said finally, closing the presentation file. "The board has approved the full program, including the media campaign. We launch next week." "That's fantastic," Jasmine replied. "The response should be positive, especially given how comprehensive the initiative is." "There will be critics," Dominic noted. "Some will call it virtue signaling or say we're capitalizing on a viral moment. Others will say we didn't go far enough." "They're not wrong to be skeptical," Jasmine acknowledged. "Corporate diversity initiatives often are performative. The difference is in the follow-through and accountability." Dominic nodded, studying her with the same thoughtful expression he'd worn during their first meeting. "You've come a long way in 2 months, Ms. Carter." "Jasmine, please," she said. "And yes, though I have much further to go." "Don't we all?" Dominic replied. After a moment, he added, "I've been meaning to ask, what are your plans after the campaign launches? Will you return to Boston?" It was a question Jasmine had been asking herself. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Boston Strategic Marketing offered to take me back, but it didn't feel right. I've been doing some freelance work while I figure out next steps." Dominic tapped his desk thoughtfully. "I may have a proposition for you, if you're interested. We've been discussing creating a new position, Director of Inclusive Marketing. Someone to ensure our advertising, customer communications, and brand messaging reflect our commitment to diversity and inclusion." Jasmine stared at him in disbelief. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm suggesting you might be the right person for a job that needs doing," Dominic clarified. "Your marketing expertise combined with your unique perspective on the importance of inclusive thinking could be valuable to Sky High. Some people would question your judgment," Jasmine said carefully. "Hiring the plain Karen for a diversity position would certainly raise eyebrows. Some people questioned my judgment when I bought a failing regional airline too," Dominic responded with a slight smile. "I'm less concerned with optics than with results." "I'll need to think about it," Jasmine said, genuinely stunned by the offer. "Of course. The position won't be formally created until after the initiative launches. We can discuss details if you're interested." As Jasmine left the office that evening, she felt a sense of possibility she hadn't experienced since before the incident. The opportunity Dominic had presented wasn't just a job offer, it was a chance to transform a painful mistake into meaningful action. The following week, the Sky High Inclusivity Initiative launched with a media event at the company's Atlanta headquarters. Dominic presented the comprehensive program to journalists, industry representatives, and community leaders. It included revised hiring practices, enhanced training programs, partnerships with HBCUs and community organizations, and a public-facing campaign featuring stories from employees and customers. The centerpiece of the launch was a panel discussion on conversations about belonging, featuring sky-high executives, diversity experts, and, most controversially, Jasmine Carter. When Jasmine took the microphone, the room fell silent. Many recognized her from the viral video, some looked confused about her presence on the panel. "Most of you know me from my worst moment," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "2 months ago, I boarded a sky-high flight and made assumptions about who belonged in first class based solely on appearance. I was wrong, embarrassingly wrong, and my behavior was captured on video for the world to see." She paused, meeting Dominic's gaze across the room. He nodded slightly, encouraging her to continue. "What you didn't see in that video was what happened afterward. Yes, there was public shame and professional consequences. But there was also an opportunity for growth, not because I deserved it, but because someone chose to see potential where others saw only failure." For the next 10 minutes, Jasmine shared her journey openly, the painful self-examination, the education, the ongoing commitment to change. She didn't minimize her mistake or present herself as fully transformed. Instead, she offered her experience as one example of how confronting bias could lead to meaningful personal growth. The response was mixed but predominantly positive. Industry publications praised Sky-High's innovative approach to corporate inclusion. Diversity consultants noted the program's comprehensive scope and emphasis on accountability. Social media reactions ranged from supportive to skeptical, but the conversation remained largely constructive. 1 month after the launch, with the initiative successfully implemented across Sky-High's operations, Jasmine accepted Dominic's job offer. The position, Director of Inclusive Marketing, would allow her to combine her professional expertise with her personal commitment to equity and inclusion. "Are you sure about this?" Layla asked during their weekly video call. "Taking a job at Sky High means your viral moment will always be part of your professional narrative." "It already is," Jasmine replied. "At least this way, it's not the end of the story." As she prepared to relocate to Atlanta, Jasmine received an unexpected email from Dominic. "Your first assignment as Director of Inclusive Marketing will be joining me on Flight 237 from Boston to Los Angeles next week. Same route, different outcome. I've reserved seats 3A and 3C. Your choice which one you take. Dominic." Jasmine smiled at the symmetry. The journey that had begun with that fateful flight was coming full circle, but this time, she was a different person boarding the plane. 1 year after the incident that changed the trajectory of her life, Jasmine Carter stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Atlanta Marriott Marquis. Before her sat hundreds of corporate executives, diversity officers, and marketing professionals attending the National Inclusive Business Conference. The room buzzed with anticipation as she prepared to deliver the keynote address. "1 year ago today," Jasmine began, "I boarded a flight that would change my life in ways I never could have imagined. Most of you know the story, it's probably why many of you are here. I made assumptions about who belonged in first class based solely on appearance, and those assumptions were captured on video for the world to see." She paused, looking out at the attentive faces. What could have been merely a humiliating viral moment became instead the beginning of a journey. One that brought me here today, not as someone who has all the answers, but as someone who has learned the value of asking better questions. From the front row, Dominic Washington watched with quiet satisfaction. When Jasmine had first proposed speaking at the conference, he'd supported the idea immediately, recognizing its potential impact. Now, seeing her confidence and clarity, he knew his instincts had been correct. Over the past year, Sky High's inclusivity initiative had transformed from a corporate program into an industry benchmark. Under Jasmine's direction, the company's marketing had evolved to authentically represent diverse experiences without falling into tokenism or stereotypes. Internal metrics showed increased employee satisfaction and retention, while customer feedback reflected appreciation for the genuine commitment to inclusive service. Most significantly, the viral video that had once been used to shame Jasmine had been repurposed as a teaching tool in corporate training programs nationwide. What began as an uncomfortable incident in first class had catalyzed meaningful conversations about bias and belonging in workplaces across the country. Transformation isn't a destination, Jasmine continued, her voice strong and clear. It's an ongoing process of recognition, education, and action. I still make mistakes. I still have blind spots. The difference is that now I have the tools to recognize them and the commitment to address them. As she concluded her speech, Jasmine invited Dominic to join her on stage. The audience rose in a standing ovation as he approached the podium. "Thank you, Jasmine," Dominic said, shaking her hand before addressing the audience. "A year ago, when I decided to reach out to Ms. Carter rather than distance myself from the incident, many questioned my judgment. Why engage with someone who had displayed such obvious bias? Why risk the company's reputation by associating with her?" He turned slightly toward Jasmine. The answer was simple, though not easy. True inclusion isn't about perfect people, it's about creating spaces where imperfect people can learn, grow, and contribute. It's about choosing growth over grievance, as my grandfather taught me. After the conference, Jasmine and Dominic shared a quiet dinner at a local restaurant, reflecting on the year's journey and discussing future initiatives. "I've been thinking about expansion," Dominic said as they waited for dessert. "Not just of Sky High's routes, but of the inclusivity program. Other companies have been asking how they might implement similar initiatives." "A consulting division?" Jasmine suggested. "It could be powerful, especially if we maintain the emphasis on authentic transformation rather than just compliance." "Exactly what I was thinking," Dominic agreed. "I'd want you to lead it, of course." Jasmine smiled, remembering how unimaginable such a conversation would have seemed a year ago. From first-class confrontation to corporate collaboration, she mused. Not exactly a traditional career path. "The best journeys rarely follow expected routes," Dominic replied. 3 days later, they found themselves on a sky-high flight from Atlanta to San Francisco for meetings with tech companies interested in the inclusivity program. Seated side by side in first class, they reviewed presentation materials as the plane reached cruising altitude. The flight attendant serving their section was Tara Brooks, the same young woman who had witnessed their initial encounter a year earlier. "Mr. Washington, Ms. Carter," she greeted them with a warm smile. "Can I get you anything before we begin meal service?" "Just water for me, thanks, Tara," Dominic replied. "The same," Jasmine added. "And Tara? It's good to see you again." As Tara moved on to other passengers, Jasmine noticed a woman across the aisle staring at her with narrowed eyes. The woman leaned over to her seatmate and whispered something, glancing back at Jasmine with obvious recognition. Once, such recognition would have filled Jasmine with shame and dread. Now, she met the woman's gaze directly, offering a small but confident smile before returning to her work. "Still happens?" Dominic asked quietly, having noticed the exchange. "Less often, but yes," Jasmine replied. "The internet has a long memory." "And how does it feel now?" Jasmine considered the question carefully. "Like a reminder rather than a condemnation," she said finally. "Of who I was, who I'm becoming, and how much work remains to be done." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion several rows ahead. A flight attendant was trying to resolve a seating dispute between two passengers, one of whom was becoming increasingly agitated. "I paid for this seat specifically," a woman's voice insisted. "I'm not going to be inconvenienced because of someone else's mistake." The words were eerily familiar. Jasmine and Dominic exchanged glances. "Excuse me," Jasmine said, unbuckling her seatbelt and standing. "I might be able to help with this." As she approached the situation, Jasmine saw a white woman in her 50s arguing with a younger Asian man about a window seat. The flight attendant looked relieved when Jasmine introduced herself as a Sky High executive. "Ma'am," Jasmine said calmly to the agitated passenger, I understand how frustrating seating mix-ups can be. Would you mind if I offered a possible solution? 20 minutes later, returning to her seat beside Dominic, Jasmine smiled at his questioning look. Crisis averted, she reported. I upgraded them both to business class and had a very interesting conversation about assumptions and courtesy. Director of Inclusive Marketing and In-Flight Mediator, Dominic observed with amusement. You've come a long way, Jasmine Carter. We both have, she replied, thinking of how their unlikely partnership had transformed not just their own perspectives but created ripples of change throughout an entire organization and beyond. As the plane continued its journey westward, Jasmine reflected on the symmetry of the moment, seated in first class beside Dominic Washington, both exactly where they belonged, working together toward a future where such belonging wouldn't be questioned based on appearance or assumption. The viral video that had once defined her worst moment had become instead the beginning of her best work. The journey wasn't complete, transformation never really was, but for the first time, Jasmine felt genuinely proud of the direction she was heading. This story illuminates several powerful truths about racial bias in America. First, unconscious biases can exist even in people who consider themselves progressive. Jasmine's assumptions about who belongs in first class reveal how deeply ingrained these attitudes can be. Second, public shaming rarely creates meaningful change. It was Dominic's strategic engagement, not punishment, that transformed the situation into growth. The narrative demonstrates how privilege operates. Jasmine never had to think about how her race affected others' perceptions of her, while Dominic faced assumptions despite his position. It shows that true accountability requires more than performative apologies. It demands education, self-reflection, and consistent action. Perhaps most importantly, this story reveals the power of choosing growth over grievance. When Dominic saw Jasmine's potential for transformation rather than defining her by her worst moment, he created space for genuine change that benefited many. Their journey reminds us that reconciliation and progress happen through difficult conversations and mutual respect, not cancellation. The story also highlights that inclusion isn't about perfect people but creating environments where imperfect people can learn and grow. Transformation is a continuous process, not a destination. Jasmine's journey wasn't completed in a day but unfolded through ongoing commitment to being better. Have you ever been judged unfairly based on your appearance, or caught yourself making assumptions about others? We all have biases. The question is what we do when confronted with them. Share your story in the comments below. Have you witnessed discrimination like Jasmine displayed, or experienced it like Dominic? How did you respond? Type growth if you believe people deserve second chances, or accountability if you think consequences should come first. If this story made you reflect on your own biases, please hit that like button and subscribe for more thought-provoking content that challenges us to be better. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how racism operates in everyday situations, even among well-meaning people. Thank you for joining this important conversation, and remember, our worst moments don't have to define us if we commit to genuine transformation. Until next time.